Wow, I love talking to young entrepreneurs. I mean, they are just, and I guess these days everybody seems like a young entrepreneur. But we just had the chance to talk to Katie Diasti, who created this company, Viv for Your V, in college. She's been out, a half a dozen years, if that, came up with this idea while she was in college and, does it all with such elegance and with a smile. We all know that there are days in any business, whether you're a physician or on the business side, where you want to pull your hair out and, put your head out the window and scream. But she just seems so enthralled and excited by what she's doing.
Absolutely.
It's amazing to see.
You know what I was so impressed with? This seemed like an education that just really, really paid off in just big numbers because, this is someone who really had an avenue to pursue, liked a course in entrepreneurship, and her school really seemed to structure her future forward with an accelerator program, giving her the tools to really build a company. So it's just very exciting,
Yeah.
and yes, I do feel a little old listening to her.
And I love the idea that she, gave a shout out to the strong women who raised her. She was raised by a single mom. Her grandmother was part of her experience, and she just was raised in a home where the women were getting things done, and it really inspired her. So that's exciting to see what has been creating this new generation of entrepreneurs.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are so excited to have our guest today, Katie Diasti, who's the founder and CEO of Viv. And in addition to that, has a number of other accolades, including a Forbes 30 under 30. So we are so delighted to hear about you and the story behind building Viv. So how'd you get here?
Hi, oh my gosh, thanks for having me. It's been such a fun journey building Viv. I think number one, I've always been really, really passionate about women's health and improving the lives of women and people with periods. So being in this space now feels like a no-brainer based on the way I grew up too. I was actually raised by a single mom who's also an entrepreneur and a veterinarian. So I watched her run her own vet practice and run and do surgeries and then come back and hang out with me and all of the above. And my grandma moved in at an early age and helped raise me too. So I was just always surrounded by these powerful women and knew that making their lives better was part of my life calling in some way. And fast forward many years, I went to school in Boston. And during my senior year, I took an entrepreneurship class and realized that this was something that I saw every day anyway in my life and something I really wanted to be involved in. And the class was like, find a problem, come up with a solution for it. And at the time, I was very, very deep in the menstrual equity space and working at a women's shelter in the Boston area and like seeing period poverty up close and understanding that there's so much that could change. But I was also a marketing, branding student, loved telling a story through a company and brand, and knew I either wanted to be part of one or build my own. And that one class project, I joke, I had never stopped working on because I ended up
Became your business.
yeah, into my full business, which has been wild. And it was so great to be on a college campus at the early days to go, and all of my target audience was right there. I would put my friends in a circle in our dorm rooms and just start asking them about their tampons and what they hated and what they wish was different. And at the time, there was no brand that resonated with this like Gen Z young millennial consumer who was looking for something that looked cute in their bathroom, but was also good for them and good for the earth. And had this like fun, warm feeling that we were seeing, especially in like the beauty aisle and the food aisle. It hadn't translated to the period aisle.
So interesting because we often hear from founders, especially young founders like yourself, that they've had some sort of personal story or event that's almost medical, but yours seems more like it was sort of fortuitous that you were working at this women's shelter. Um, you always hear in shelters that socks are, always needed. How did you find out that period products were needed? Was it conversations with the women that were there, or tell us about that?
Yeah, it's actually one of the least donated items too, because of naturally some of the stigma around it. And the shelter I was working at with had a direct supplier, and one of my many roles that I was running around doing there was also passing out the pads and tampons to the women that would come in. And we could only allocate a certain amount per day and had to hand them these like clunky cardboard boxes of these like very low quality products. And no matter what situation you're in, you do have a preference on the kind of period care you use, whether it's a cultural preference based on if you're using a pad versus a tampon, and just learn so much of like how many people need is so different depending on their body. And there was this like cookie cutter way of distribution, but knowing everyone's body isn't, built the same. So it didn't really make sense to me. And also was something that felt so silly to like charge so much for people who needed it. And it's such a bare necessity at the end of the day. It's like toilet paper, right? Like we see that for free in public bathrooms, and how can we make it more accessible? So that's what sparked a lot of that.
So you brought up so many interesting points that I want to focus on there. It is not a highly donated item compared to other things, but it is desperately needed. And, we don't often think of period care as something that requires personalization because we haven't been offered products that way. So what were some of the insights that you learned firsthand and that went into the creation of how you built Viv, of how you packaged it, of the ingredients that you put into the products? And for those people who are listening, there are many states where you have to know what's in your Cheerios, but you do not have to, the government does not have to let you know what the ingredients are in something that you insert intravaginally.
Yeah, isn't that wild? It's so
Crazy.
crazy. Learning some of these things really did send me on this like mission to innovate in this category, and learning about the amount of plastic waste involved in period care too. Like a regular pad can take 800 years to break down, has as much plastic as 4 plastic bags. It's wild to think about that. I didn't realize that, when I was using pads and tampons growing up, thinking about the amount of impact it had on the environment, but also the kinds of harsh chemicals and toxins that are in these products. A lot of them line up with what's in Roundup weed killers and things like that, which is wild to be putting on your skin or in an incredibly absorbent part of your body. So when I was learning about these harsh chemicals and things, I was like, okay, what's a better alternative? And growing up culturally, I grew up in an immigrant family. My mom immigrated from Egypt. We mainly just used pads. We barely talked about periods to begin with, but I was more of a pad user, and I wanted to find like a better alternative to a pad. And I was looking at all these different fiber alternatives and seeing what we could do, and fell into bamboo, which is what our pads are now made of today. And it's such a great fiber because it reduces so much agro waste, uses way less land and water to grow. It grows best without any harsh fertilizers, but it's also a really soft and absorbent fiber. So it just makes so much sense for something like a menstrual pad. And I was like, oh my gosh, why is this really not being introduced in the US? Why isn't this an option yet? And our wrappers are actually made out of cornstarch instead of plastic. They're certified home compostable. There's no plastic at all in our pads, but the back sheet like looks like plastic. It all acts and looks like it. And making sure that we have an option that, makes people feel comfortable on their periods. It's not always the most comfortable time. So how can we make something they're used to using, but just better? And we found that by switching to bamboo, it was actually 4 times more absorbent than the traditional products. And
Wow.
it's like you don't have to choose anymore. That's our mentality a lot of the time at Viv. Is like, why sacrifice one thing when you can have sustainability and performance and safety all in one? And But just by changing something like the fiber used really allowed us to do that. And when we were first getting these samples in, I was all about getting as much feedback as possible. So I was in Boston at the time and recently had graduated and was all in on Viv and would go to these events called the Boston Women's Market, and we would all have our tables and people would be selling art or jewelry or soaps, and I had a
And
table
and you're
there.
selling period products.
Yeah, and it was like, oh my God, who invited her? But I would just bring, and I didn't even have the brand launched yet. I just would bring the samples I would get from our manufacturer and these boxes I would make and a sign I made at Staples, and it was very scrappy. And people would walk by me, and I had a sign that said "sustainable period care," and people were like, "What is sustainable period care?" Like I never even heard of that.
Those
And
weren't words that we had ever put together.
Right.
yeah,
Well, Boston is
exactly.
a great place and a young town, so plenty of menstruators around. I'm curious with the bamboo because the concerns about a lot of the chemicals in traditional tampons and pads are due to where they're grown or, any pesticides or whatnot that may be contaminating. And that's been a real issue. And apparently, we all have a credit card's worth of plastic in our brains right now. So, thank you for being cognizant of that with your products. Where is the bamboo grown, and how are you checking for the sustainability, or rather, I should say, the lack of chemicals in the bamboo?
Yeah, this is so important and something we're really proud of because we have extensive product safety testing on all of our products, our tampons as well, which we can definitely get into because I know
Yeah.
that's been a hot topic in the past year. And then our pads go through extensive heavy metal testing, toxin testing, to make sure there are no traces. And our bamboo is grown in China where it's naturally grown and harvested there. And our manufacturers are making medical devices. So we're making sure it's a safe product and going through the 510(k) application process. But as you mentioned, that process is still letting in a lot of products that aren't really that great. So we have some really amazing third-party testing that are also like membrane testing. If this is going and touching your membranes, are there any traces that could go into your body that are harmful? And we ensure it's below even the like okay rate of
Yeah.
approval.
So you had
Yeah.
come
And that,
out when the study came out that there was, a concerning level of chemicals in all the tampons in the past year. You guys had, a very strong response. Share what that what was so concerning and what your response was from a company standpoint.
Yeah, with UC Berkeley and NIH, there was a study that there were traces of arsenic and lead found in a lot of tampons. And obviously, that's very daunting if someone's a tampon user, which is a lot of people in the US. So we were like, okay, let's one, make sure that all of our tests are clear and ready to go and accessible to our community. So we decided to create a new page on our website that made it really easy to see all of our product testing and show how truly safe our products are. But we also acknowledge that like this is fearful and like this is daunting and scary. Here is a solution, and Viv has been here, and we've been preaching this from years before this study came out. And we, because we responded fast on our socials, which a lot of brands were really scared to respond and didn't know how to, and their
And
legal
was
team.
that because they didn't know if they were above the standards that were being complained about?
I think that's definitely part of the case. I think also their legal team was like, it's easier to not respond and safer that way. But for us, it's like, this is so integral to our brand. Like, it just so makes much sense to talk about safety. So we made the decision to be one of the first voices out there as a brand. And it really paid dividends in the sense that so many doctors, creators, influencers, news sources were then putting Viv at the forefront as a, hey, they have all this testing that proves they're a safe company and the safe brand. You can use these tampons and like feel safe using them. And we had a very big viral moment through that. And we thought we had 6 months worth of inventory. We sold it out in 3 weeks and had this long wait list. And we're like, who is signing up for a wait list for tampons? Like, this is so crazy to us. But it was just this
to be
overwhelming.
fair, the tampon companies, the big box tampon companies, really did respond to that smaller study to state that the amount of these chemicals was well below, or these heavy metals, I should say, was well below what was acceptable. But to your point, when you think about even a small amount that's quote unquote acceptable, it can be a little frightening. The answer for many of my patients was to move on to a menstrual cup, for various reasons. Number one, no issue with those types of chemicals being present, but also for the sustainability angle. And I know you focus on cups, pads, and tampons. So where do the cups fall in terms of the volume that you're selling? And did you notice an increase in that after that study came out?
Yes, there was definitely a great increase in sales of menstrual cups and just general awareness around them too, which is always great to see. There's obviously so many benefits of a menstrual cup. It's so a great sustainable option since we're using it. And just even like we've been anecdotally have heard so much from our community and our customers that they feel like it relieves some cramping for them too, which is always great to hear. And getting to have it in all day is awesome. You don't have to think about it so much or change it as much as a tampon or a pad. Like keeping it in for 12 hours a day. Like I will often forget I'm on my period when I'm using a cup. So it's a great alternative. And it's something that we innovated with really early. It was after the pads, we actually made cups, and we would always get this feedback that, hey, I'm a little bit scared of like how to
Yeah.
use it. It's a little intimidating. And I think there's still this a little bit of intimidation towards menstrual cups and menstrual discs today. And our whole mission is like, how can we make this more approachable and easier to use and more comfortable for our consumers? And for us, it was hearing that they were afraid it was going to get stuck. And so we added a loop and a pull tab to our cups and discs to make it easier to remove. Something so simple, but something that makes such a big impact. And our cup has gone viral on TikTok a few times, and so many people in the comment section were like, oh my God, this is going to be my first cup ever. I'm so excited to try it. Like I'm a beginner. And we kept hearing that beginner word over and over again. And we're like, wow, we are really with the beginner community, which is a lot of people right now. So we actually made a beginner starter kit all around like, hey, if you're new to cups or if you're new to a disc, like we have a disc starter kit and a cup starter kit.
Yeah.
And we made this booklet of all of our own like personal pro tips of like, this is what I use. I like to remove mine in the shower. Like, this is how I clean my cup. Every question we got under the sun, which is kind of the beauty of social media these days, whether you like it or not, people are
Yeah.
going to give you all their feedback and all their opinions. And we've just taken that as like a really great resource and used it to design our product line.
Yeah, I think the learning curve is the biggest hurdle to get through, but it's sort of like riding a bike. So once you figure out your preferred way of insertion and removal, all works. To your point about cramps, I have heard that anecdotally as well. I'm not aware of any like medical literature that suggests a real improvement in cramps, but if you think about it, cups collect blood rather than absorb blood. So there's no drying effect, if you will, like there might be with a tampon, and clots can kind of pass freely. So that's really just for our listeners. So here's today's hot flash. Per unwomen.org, in the United States of America, 1 in 4 teens and 1 in 3 adults struggle to afford period products.
So one of the things, you're in this market, and Alyssa's been in this field as a practitioner and now on the business side, and for decades, as have I. So there's a lot more competition. There are a lot more
Yeah.
people and companies coming out with different approaches. How do you think about, the increasing competition? One of the things I love, as Alyssa mentioned, about talking to young entrepreneurs is you think about purchase options and purchase characteristics that we just didn't. You know, I
Mm,
remember when I first started working in business, I remember one company that talked about giving back to the community, and it was Ben and Jerry's ice cream. And they gave 10% of their profits, but it wasn't a real purchase criteria the way it is now, that,
Yeah.
you want to buy from companies that reflect your values, that are good, that are doing good. And you really seem to live and build the company around those values. But you're still in this very competitive space. When you look out at the world, what do you think? What do you see? Do you collaborate with these other companies? Do you feel like you're all singing from the same, songbook?
Yeah, I'm so happy to see some overdue innovation in the aisle in the category. And we, often pose this question to like the big retail buyers that decide, are you going to be the one on shelf at like a big box retailer that a lot of these brands want to be on? And they often say, like, I suspect there's going to be even more innovation over the next 5 years. And it's still so early on in its journey of like natural period care. We have such a tiny section of the aisle. If you go down the period care aisle, there's like 25 facings of Tampax and 4 facings of a natural brand. And what can we do collectively as innovators and new brands in this category to like lift each other up? Because if I was the only natural brand, the only menstrual cup to exist in the market, we would need a lot of help. And, building a new category would take a lot more funding, a lot more people, a lot more innovation. It's something that we do really need competitors to build out this whole new category that hasn't existed for so long for women and people with periods. So I will often get coffee with our competitors and other founders in the space. And it's funny because I think in other lives we'd all probably be best friends because we have very similar life and such. But obviously we like to keep like somewhat of a respectful distance, but
Right.
oftentimes realizing like that if one of us wins, we all win because we need more facings in this aisle. And it's not, natural versus natural, it's natural versus these old conventional companies that don't have good things in them. And so that's how I've been viewing the competition.
So you mentioned funding. This is a heavy lift. You're competing against really entrenched, established, powerful competitors who have been leading the market, and they control what we used to call the planogram, what the shelf set looks like in store. Talk a little bit about your funding to the extent that you're comfortable sharing it, and where you are available. A little bit about your business model. It's obviously you have retail, also have direct to consumer. Talk about that journey of raising money. And again, Alyssa and I have both been in many rooms where you're talking about, raising money they think everything sounds like it's related to the vagina, but which is fine. Talk about that experience of being a young person raising money and who responded and where you've used those funds to drive growth.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The fundraising journey is so interesting. And obviously the market is ever changing. We've raised about 1.3 million to date, predominantly from angel investors, angel groups, and then individuals who were founders that have exited their companies recently, and even experts in the same space. The former president of FemCare, Kimberly Clark, who started You by Kotex as an angel investor in Viv and clearly believes
Amazing.
future of where this is going, and some folks who built beauty brands are acquired by L'Oreal. Those are all really helpful experts to have in the space. Obviously, this is my first business and new to entrepreneurship in terms of where I see my career going. But
How did you attract them? How did you know them? How did you reach out to them?
yeah, so many funny different ways. Some of our angel investors started off as mentors, some through maybe an accelerator program. Others I would cold reach out to on LinkedIn because in the early days, this was like 2020, starting to build the brand, and we would host these virtual webinars around sustainability or beauty or wellness. And I would reach out to these incredible founders and say, hey, want to be a part of this panel we're hosting, that we're live streaming. And then they would become mentors and friends of the brand. And then it got to a point where it's like, I'm thinking about fundraising. Like, I'm thinking about raising a little bit of money from angel investors. Like, what do you think I should do? And they're like, great, I want to put in my first check. And met them kind of where they were at, where they were starting their angel investors careers. And I was starting my fundraising career. And so it ended up being these long-term relationships that I was building over the years. And there's this great concept that's, I think, taught a lot with fundraising, that you're a point on a graph for an investor. And without knowing it or not, I was very much adopted that, where I was letting our community know and letting these mentors and people in my network know my progress month by month or quarter by quarter for years before I even thought about fundraising. And then when fundraising kind of fell into our lap, I realized I had this whole community of people I'd been telling about my story for the past 2 years that were ready and excited to invest because they were seeing all the growth and momentum. But if I had just reached out to them for the first time, the moment I needed money, it would have been so much harder to tell all the story of how far we've come. So that I think really did help our fundraising journey and being able to really paint that picture. One of my like favorite quotes about a good founder is, the founder has their boots on the ground, their eyes on the horizon, and their head in the clouds. And I think the head in the clouds part is really important, and like having a little bit of that
Spinning
delusion.
plates and rubbing your
Yeah.
stomach and touching your nose.
Yeah.
It sounds like the program you went through at your university was amazing. Did you bootstrap this to start off, or were you given, help from your program?
Yeah, a few days after I graduated, I jumped into an accelerator program that's actually created by some alumni at my university, and we each got $5,000, and that had got me through the point of like about a year and a half of innovation, finding manufacturers, doing some of the initial FDA documents, all of this stuff was very much bootstrapped with that 5K, which to me at the time felt like so much money and like so much opportunity.
I love that. Well, you know what? It just gives a lot of hope. So if you keep your head in the clouds, for sure, for all the budding entrepreneurs out there. I have to ask, because you mentioned the bamboo naturally comes from China. Is this something that's going to put a big dent in your, supply chain with all the talk about tariffs and all of that, or have you planned for this? I know so many companies are really scrambling.
Yeah, it's something we've been planning for, surprisingly, for a while. And it's interesting because some of our products are not made in China, some of them are. And it's going to be very interesting to see. And we've been building these relationships with these manufacturers for so long. And it's just devastating to see how many small businesses are impacted by these tariffs. And I have so many friends in the apparel or shoe space and other categories. And being able to not manufacture in China is very difficult if you're an emerging brand. They're much more flexible on minimum order quantities. They're more willing to work with an emerging brand. A lot of these other manufacturers that we tried to talk to when we were early stage were shooing us away. They were like, I don't have time for you on my line. We have a minimum order quantity of 1 million units. Can you do that? And I was like, oh, I definitely can't do that. And so, luckily with our growth, it's like, okay, we do now have the opportunity to explore more options, but I know that's not the case for so many companies and brands. And it's wild because there's so much innovation in these manufacturers there that I'd love to see continue to be accessible here in the US. And I'm staying hopeful. I definitely have taken the optimistic approach that everything's going to work out. And we've been resilient to a million different things over the years and ever-changing things with administrations and what have you. And so one thing we're good at as a team is being really resilient. And I think that's coming to prove and as another key skill again.
Yeah, just to give a very specific example, a company that we're quite familiar with that is in the more of the pleasure arena, just recently reported that the cost of their device was going from $30 to make to $75. So, yeah, and that in many cases takes away any margin you might have and might make it literally just not possible to sell. The old adage, you're losing money on every product, we'll make it up in volume. You've been in business for 12 seconds and that's not true. So have you had any feedback that the cost of your goods are going to change dramatically, or have you bought a significant amount of inventory in advance of what look like these changes?
Yeah, so we've recently launched into some new retail distribution, which led us to having a lot more product on hand, which I'm very thankful that timing worked out by chance because, you can't predict a lot of these things and we weren't really given a lot of notice, which is unfortunate. But we sell our company. I know this was previously asked, but we sell, of course, on our website and then in retail doors and We have chains like Wegmans and Stop and Shop, Meijer in the Midwest, but we just recently launched in Whole Foods nationwide and
Yeah.
all their doors, which is really exciting. And so we are
Amazing.
really stocked up because we wanted to make sure we are always ready to go, no matter how it's selling through at Whole Foods. And so luckily we're in a position where we can have a little time to strategically think about what actually makes sense as the best next step, and actively, as things change. When we first learned about the tariffs, the actual amount changed like 3 or 4 times before we could finish a financial model to understand. And it's like, how do they expect these small brands to adapt so fast when we are still figuring out how much things cost? It's been wild. It's definitely what they
Sure.
call unprecedented times again.
Yeah, we hear that word all the time. So, what is coming down the pike for your company in terms of future pipeline? And what do you do in your free time, if you even have any? You seem like you're super measured. So I hope you have some free time to enjoy.
Oh my gosh. We have lots of exciting partnerships, more retail growth happening, and we've recently launched a few new products. Our menstrual disc is brand new, and we're seeing that grow a lot in popularity as a SKU, which is so exciting. And I think it's been great just being able to respond to what customers want. And so as our community asks for more things, we'll try to make it happen. But we're a small team and we've just been really adaptable. And so it's been a fun journey. In terms of what I do for fun, that's a great question. I definitely love to stay active, and I grew up as like a competitive tennis player and an athlete, and I still love to play tennis, or pickleball is a little bit more social version of the sport.
Where can people find you and learn more about the company, Viv?
Yes, so you can find us. Viv for your V is all of our social media handles. We're very active on TikTok. We are like your cool big sister on TikTok when it comes to content. Vivforyourv.com is our website. We're on YouTube, Instagram, all that fun stuff. And you can find us now at Whole Foods, at any of your Whole Foods near you.
It's
Yeah.
so great to meet you. And I feel a little maternal when I say this, Alyssa. I'm sure you'll understand what I mean. It's like so exciting
I
to
know.
see you building this. You've been out of school, single digit number of years, and creating something and facing off against big companies and big challenges with a smile on your face. So we are wishing you continued success and a great relationship with Whole Foods and the other partners that you bring on, and we'll be watching.
Thank you both so much. Appreciate it.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.